You grab a packet of something colorful from the shelf, throw it in your kid's lunchbox, thinking you're doing fine. Maybe you even check the front of the package, see a few happy words like natural or wholesome, and off you go. But here's what almost nobody tells you. Some of the most popular kids' snack brands sold right here in Australia aren't quite what they seem. And I'm not talking about the obvious junk food, the stuff everyone knows is bad. I'm talking about the ones marketed as healthy, the ones with smiling children on the packaging, the ones you trust. What if I told you that 9 of these brands contain ingredients or formulations that might make you think twice before handing them to your child ever again? Stay with me, because what you're about to discover might change your next trip to Coles or Woolies completely. Let me start by saying I'm not a nutritionist or a scientist. I'm just a regular Australian parent who started paying closer attention to what my kids were actually eating. And honestly, the more I looked, the more uncomfortable I became. So I did what anyone would do. I started comparing labels, reading ingredient lists properly, not just the marketing on the front, and tracking down information that manufacturers don't exactly advertise. What I found was a pattern, a disconnect between what these brands want you to believe and what they're actually putting inside those brightly colored packets. Now, I want to be clear from the start. This isn't about shaming anyone for what they feed their kids. We're all doing our best in a system designed to confuse us. And it's not about fear-mongering or claiming everything is poison. It's about transparency. It's about arming yourself with information so you can make genuinely informed choices, not just choices based on clever packaging and marketing. Because that's the thing, the food industry in Australia, like everywhere else, is incredibly good at making things look healthier than they are. And our kids are the primary targets. So let's talk about these 9 brands. And I should mention, the order doesn't necessarily reflect how problematic they are. It's more about building a picture of the landscape we're dealing with. First up, and this one surprised me initially, certain popular fruit snack brands that dominate the lunchbox scene. You know the ones. They come in little pouches or boxes. They're brightly colored, and they taste like concentrated sugar bombs dressed up as fruit. Here's the issue. Many of these products contain barely any real fruit. Instead, they're loaded with fruit concentrate, which sounds healthy until you realize it's essentially just another form of sugar, plus added sugars on top of that. Then there's the artificial colors and flavors, some of which have been linked to hyperactivity in children in various studies, though the companies will argue the amounts are within legal limits. That's technically true. But legal doesn't always mean ideal, especially when a child is consuming multiple products throughout the day that all contain these same additives. What really got me was comparing the Australian formulation of some of these brands to their versions in other countries. In some cases, the exact same product sold in Europe, for instance, uses natural colorings because regulations there are stricter. But here in Australia, they stick with the artificial versions because they're cheaper, and they can. That tells you something about priorities, doesn't it? It's not about what's best for our kids, it's about what they can get away with under Australian food standards, which, let's be honest, aren't always as protective as we'd like to think. Moving on to another category that might surprise you, certain breakfast cereal bars specifically marketed to children. These things are everywhere, in school canteens, in vending machines, in every supermarket aisle. The packaging screams wholesome grains and energy for active kids. But flip them over and read the ingredients. Many of these bars contain more sugar per serving than a chocolate biscuit. And I'm not exaggerating, I've stood in the aisle with my phone calculator doing the math. Some have upwards of 15 to 20 grams of sugar in a single bar that's supposedly a healthy breakfast option. That's roughly 4 to 5 teaspoons of sugar. For breakfast. For a child. Then there's the fiber claim they love to make. Yes, some of these bars contain fiber, but often it's added as an isolated ingredient, not from whole grains like the packaging implies. You might see chicory root fiber or inulin listed, which are added fibers that don't provide the same nutritional benefits as fiber from actual whole grains and fruits. It's a way of boosting the fiber number on the nutrition panel without actually making the product more nutritious in any meaningful sense. And because Australian regulations allow them to highlight that fiber content On the front of the pack, consumers naturally assume it's a healthier choice. Clever, but misleading. Here's where it gets more concerning. Several popular yogurt brands aimed specifically at kids fall into this trap as well. Now, yogurt sounds healthy, right? It's dairy, it's got probiotics, it's good for digestion, and that's all true if you're eating plain, unsweetened yogurt. But the ones marketed to children, the ones with cartoon characters and fun flavors and bright colors, they're often more like desserts, pretending to be health food. Some contain as much sugar as ice cream, genuinely comparable amounts. And again, this isn't hidden information, it's right there on the label. But who has time to stand in the dairy aisle comparing every single product? That's what they're counting on, that you won't. What bothers me even more about these yogurt products is the probiotic claim. Yes, they contain probiotics, but feeding your child something with beneficial bacteria while simultaneously loading them up with sugar creates a contradictory situation. Sugar feeds harmful bacteria in the gut, potentially undermining whatever benefit those probiotics might provide. It's like trying to fill a bucket that has a hole in the bottom. Sure, you're adding something good, but you're also creating conditions that work against it. And then there's the matter of flavored milk products designed for kids. This one hits close to home because I used to buy these regularly, thinking I was giving my children calcium and protein in a form they'd actually consume. And yes, they do contain calcium and protein, but many of these products also contain as much sugar as soft drinks, sometimes more. We're talking about 12 to 15 grams per 200 milliliter serve. That's troubling because milk is already perceived as inherently healthy, so parents don't scrutinize it the way they would a can of Coke. But if you're giving your child one of these every day, you're essentially giving them a daily soft drink, just with added calcium. The industry defense is always that kids need calories, and that these products provide nutrients alongside the sugar. And sure, there's some truth to that, but the question becomes, at what point does the sugar content outweigh the nutritional benefit? Especially when we know that Australian children are already consuming far more sugar than recommended guidelines suggest they should. The Heart Foundation recommends kids aged 4 to 8 should have no more than 4 teaspoons of added sugar per day. One of these flavored milk products can contain 3 to 4 teaspoons on its own. That doesn't leave much room for anything else throughout the day. Now, let's talk about something that shocked me when I first discovered it. Certain brands of crackers and savory snacks marketed as healthier alternatives to chips. These are the ones parents grab feeling virtuous, thinking they're making a better choice. And in some cases, they might be marginally better than traditional potato chips. But marginal is the key word. Many of these products are still highly processed, contain significant amounts of sodium, and use refined grains rather than whole grains, despite what the packaging might imply. And here's a sneaky one. Some use vegetable oils that are heavily processed, oils that when consumed regularly in the quantities kids tend to eat. These snacks aren't ideal for long-term health. The sodium content alone should give us pause. Some of these crackers contain nearly as much salt per serving as a packet of regular chips. And because they're marketed as healthier, kids and parents alike tend to eat more of them, thinking it's fine because they're the better option. But if you're consuming twice as much of something that's only marginally better, you've actually made things worse. It's a classic case of the health halo effect, where the perception of healthiness leads to overconsumption. Then there's the whole grain claim that appears on so many of these products. Australian food standards allow a product to be labeled as containing whole grains, even if whole grains aren't the primary ingredient. So you might see whole grain listed third or fourth on the ingredient list, after refined flour and other less nutritious components, but the front of the package still gets to shout about whole grains. It's technically legal, but it's designed to mislead. And most people don't know to check where whole grain actually appears in the ingredient list, so they trust the front label and move on. Here's another category that deserves scrutiny. Certain brands of muesli bars and granola bars aimed at children. These are lunchbox staples across Australia, and I get it. They're convenient. They don't need refrigeration. Kids generally like them. But many of these bars are held together with sugar syrups, contain chocolate chips or yogurt coatings that add even more sugar, and use ingredients like rice crisps or puffed grains that have minimal nutritional value. They're essentially candy bars with a few oats thrown in for appearances. What's particularly frustrating is that some of these brands make claims about being a source of whole grains or containing no artificial colors, which is true, but they conveniently don't mention that they're also 30 to 40% sugar by weight. That's a higher sugar percentage than some chocolate bars. But because they're in the health food aisle and have words like nature and wholesome on the packaging, we give them a pass. I certainly did, until I started actually reading the numbers instead of just the marketing messages. And it's not just about sugar, though that's a huge part of it. It's also about what these products don't contain. Real nutrition. Vitamins and minerals that aren't artificially added. Fiber from actual whole food sources. Protein in meaningful amounts. These bars often provide a quick energy spike from sugar and refined carbs, followed by a crash, which then leads kids to want more food, often more of the same quick energy foods. It's a cycle that benefits manufacturers, not children. Moving to another category, certain juice and juice drink products specifically formulated for kids. Now, this is a contentious area because fruit juice in general has come under increased scrutiny in recent years, even 100% fruit juice. But the products I'm talking about are even more problematic because many of them aren't even real juice. They're juice drinks, meaning they contain some juice, but also added water, added sugar, and often artificial flavors and colors. The percentage of actual juice might be as low as 25%, with the rest being essentially flavored sugar water. The packaging on these products is brilliant from a marketing standpoint and terrible from a health standpoint. They show bright, fresh fruit, happy children, and use phrases like contains real fruit or vitamin C added. All technically true. But what they don't prominently display is that a single serving can contain as much sugar as a can of soft drink, with none of the fiber that would come from eating actual fruit. And because they're portioned in small boxes or pouches, it's easy for kids to consume 2 or 3 in a day without anyone really noticing. What concerns me most about these juice drinks is how normalized they've become. They're in every school canteen, at every kid's party, in every lunchbox. We've collectively accepted them as an appropriate drink for children, when really they're just another form of liquid sugar that contributes to the growing rates of childhood obesity and dental problems we're seeing across Australia. And the vitamin C they add? You'd get far more nutritional benefit from eating an orange, which also provides fiber and other nutrients, and doesn't come with 10 teaspoons of added sugar. Now, here's where things get a bit more complicated. Some of the brands I'm discussing have introduced healthier lines, or reformulated versions with less sugar, less salt, more whole grains, and that's genuinely positive. But here's the catch. Those reformulated products are often more expensive and aren't always the versions being marketed most heavily to children. The cartoon character packaging, the bright colors, the fun shapes, those are still usually attached to the original, less healthy formulations. So unless you're specifically looking for the healthier version and willing to pay more for it, you're likely still buying the problematic one. This brings up a broader issue about food marketing to children in Australia. Unlike some countries, we don't have particularly strict regulations about what can and can't be marketed directly to kids. So these companies can put cartoon characters on nutritionally questionable products. They can advertise during children's programming. They can position products at kid eye level in supermarkets, and they can sponsor school events and sports teams. All of this creates an environment where children are constantly exposed to branding and messaging for foods that aren't in their best interest. And parents are left trying to navigate this landscape while also dealing with pester power, and the reality that these products are often cheaper and more convenient than healthier alternatives. Let me also mention certain brands of processed cheese products marketed to kids. You know the ones I mean: individually wrapped slices, squeezy tubes, character-shaped pieces. These products barely resemble real cheese. Many contain more additives, emulsifiers, and fillers than actual cheese. The ingredient list reads like a chemistry experiment. Things like sodium phosphate, calcium phosphate, sorbic acid, artificial colors. Yes, they provide some calcium, and yes, kids might actually eat them unlike regular cheese, but at what cost? are we really comfortable feeding our children something that's more food science project than actual food? The issue here is similar to the other products I've discussed. The marketing emphasizes the positive, calcium, protein, fun, and convenient, while completely obscuring the negative, highly processed, full of additives, nutritionally inferior to real cheese. And because it's sold in the dairy section next to actual cheese, consumers mentally categorize it as cheese, as dairy, as something wholesome. But if you put a slice of this processed cheese product next to a slice of real cheddar and compared the ingredient lists, you'd see a stark difference. One has milk, salt, maybe cultures and enzymes. The other has 15 or more ingredients you'd need a chemistry degree to fully understand. And finally, let's talk about certain brands of fruit snack pouches, the squeezable ones, that have become absolutely ubiquitous in the last few years. These are marketed as pure fruit, convenient fruit on the go, a serving of fruit in a pouch, and in some cases, the better brands genuinely are just pured fruit. But many others contain added sugars, concentrates rather than whole fruit, and sometimes even vegetable purees that are there more for bulk and sweetness than nutrition. The problem is that even the ones that are just fruit aren't quite the nutritional equivalent of eating actual fruit. When fruit is pureed and packaged, it loses fiber structure, which means it's absorbed differently in the body, more like juice than whole fruit. And because it's already broken down, it doesn't require chewing, which matters more than you might think. Chewing signals satiety. It slows down consumption. It aids in digestion. A child can suck down a pouch in seconds and not feel satisfied, whereas eating an apple takes time and is more filling. So while these pouches seem like a healthy, convenient option, they may actually be contributing to overconsumption and don't provide the same benefits as whole fruit. What really bothers me about these pouches is how they're positioned as a replacement for actual fruit rather than an occasional supplement to it. Parents feel good because their kids are consuming fruit, but if that fruit is always in pureed pouch form, children aren't learning to eat and enjoy whole fruits and vegetables. They're not developing the jaw strength and coordination that comes from chewing. They're not learning about textures and flavors in their natural form. And they're potentially consuming more fruit sugar in a shorter time than they would if they were eating pieces of fruit, which could impact blood sugar regulation. So what's the common thread here? It's the gap between marketing and reality. It's products that are designed to look and sound healthier than they actually are. It's regulatory systems that allow companies to make claims that are technically true, but practically misleading. It's a food environment where convenience and profit are prioritized over genuine nutrition. And it's the fact that as parents and consumers, we're expected to navigate all of this while doing 100 other things, which is why so many of us just grab what looks okay and hope for the best. Here's what shifted my perspective on all of this. I realized that if I had to read a label really carefully to figure out if something was healthy, it probably wasn't. Actually, healthy foods don't need elaborate marketing. An apple doesn't need to convince you it's good for you. A carrot doesn't have a list of health claims on its packaging. The more a processed food product has to sell itself as healthy, the more skeptical I've learned to be. Does this mean I never buy any of these products? No. I'm realistic about life with kids, about busy schedules, about the fact that sometimes convenience matters, and that's okay. But I've become much more selective. I read labels properly now, not just the front, but the actual ingredient list and nutritional panel. I compare products even when it takes extra time. I've stopped trusting marketing claims and started trusting data. And I've tried to reduce how often these products appear in my shopping trolley, replacing them where possible with less processed alternatives, or just accepting that some things don't need a packaged equivalent. The other thing I've done is talk to my kids about it, in age-appropriate ways. I don't want to create anxiety or disordered thinking around food, but I do want them to understand that not everything marketed to them is good for them, that companies make these products to make money, not to make them healthy, and that reading and understanding labels is an important life skill, because they're growing up in a world where they'll be bombarded with this stuff forever. And I'd rather equip them to think critically about it than just accept whatever the loudest marketing tells them. So what should you do with this information? That's entirely up to you. Maybe you'll decide to avoid these 9 categories entirely. Maybe you'll just be more selective within them, choosing the better options when they exist. Maybe you'll reduce frequency rather than eliminate completely. There's no single right answer because every family situation is different, every budget is different, every child's needs and preferences are different. But here's what I'd suggest as a starting point. Next time you're shopping, pick up 3 or 4 products from these categories that you regularly buy. Actually read the ingredient lists. Look at the sugar content per serve. Compare them to alternatives, including whole food options. Ask yourself honestly if the convenience and marketing claims are worth what's actually in the package. And then make your decision based on information rather than assumption. You might be surprised by what you find, or you might decide it doesn't matter enough to change anything. Either way, you'll be making a genuinely informed choice, which is really all any of us can do. The food industry isn't going to change unless consumers demand it. And we demand it by choosing differently, by supporting brands that prioritize nutrition over marketing, by being willing to pay a bit more or take a bit more time for genuinely better options. It's not about perfection, it's about direction. Small changes over time add up. And the more of us who start asking questions and reading labels and refusing to accept that processed convenience foods are equivalent to real nutrition, the more pressure there is on manufacturers to actually improve their products rather than just improve their packaging. Remember, these companies exist to make profit, and they'll make whatever we're willing to buy. If we keep buying sugar-laden products dressed up as health food, they'll keep making them. But if enough people start choosing differently, if enough people start calling out the misleading marketing, if enough people prioritize actual nutrition over convenience, the market will shift. It always does. That's how change happens, slowly, incrementally, one shopping trip at a time. So the next time you reach for that brightly colored package with the smiling cartoon character and the health claims, just pause for a moment, turn it over, read what's actually in it, and then decide if that's really what you want to give your child. You might still choose it, and that's fine, but you'll be choosing it knowing what it is, not what the marketing wants you to think it is. And that difference, that small act of awareness, that's where real change begins.